Good morning, everybody. The USS Nautilus was the first nuclear-powered submarine, and it was developed during the 1950s. And it was on this date in 1958, August 3, that it made its first complete transit under the North Pole. This is the chambered nautilus. It's a mollusk, and it gets its name from the Greek word for sailor. Now, you may have heard of Jules Verne. He's considered by many to be the father of science fiction. You've probably read some of his books. And in this one, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was published in 1869, he has a submarine called the Nautilus. And here's its captain, Captain Nemo. Supposedly Jules Verne had seen a submarine and was inspired by it. So here's one of our World War II submarines. These were very successful, particularly against the Japanese. And note, it has a flat deck. So these were basically surface ships that were designed to submerge occasionally, but they were their most efficient when they were on the surface. So here's that graphite core at the University of Chicago where the first controlled reaction of a split atom occurred, part of the Manhattan Project. And once World War II was finished, questions arose about other applications for nuclear power. And here's Hyman Rickover. He was in the Navy for, I think, about 60 years. He was an electrical engineer, and he's considered the father of the nuclear Navy and had a lot to do with the building and the launching of the Nautilus. And here the Nautilus is being launched. The keel had been laid by President Truman. So when this ship slid into the water, the big question was, will that nuclear power plant work? Now, here's a photo of the Nautilus, and notice it still has a flat deck. So in that sense, it was traditional. It was sort of like those World War II submarines. But internally, it had that nuclear power plant, so that made it really an experimental warship. So here's the patch for the Nautilus. You'll notice it has a mollusk riding, what is that, a torpedo? Maybe it's a shark. And the patch was designed by Walt Disney, a fun fact. So here's a prototype of the nuclear power plant that was in the Nautilus. So people had no idea if this was going to work, but let's give it a try and see what happens. Well, when the Russians put Sputnik up in outer space, pictured here, in the 50s, this made Americans really nervous because it looks like the Russians had beat us into outer space. And it didn't take long for people to realize you could put a nuclear warhead on a rocket. So we reacted by building up our own missile forces, and here's a picture of a missile being launched from a submarine-based missile. So submarine design in the 50s had to do with nuclear power, but also can the submarine carry rockets and missiles in potential conflict. So the operation to go under the North Pole, which is our event, August 3, 1958, was known as Operation Sunshine. And the Nautilus was to go under the surface at the Bering Sea, go under the North Pole, and surface again near Greenland. But there are a lot of issues with this. Near the poles, traditional compasses don't work. So they are afraid the crew would be disoriented. And the ice extends below the surface. Would there be room for the Nautilus to even go along the sea floor? But it worked, and it was a successful mission. Now here's the USS Albacore. This was built as a design concept ship. You'll notice it's shaped like a cigar. This was built also during the 1950s, but it's shaped more like a fish. It doesn't have a flat deck. And here's one of our modern attack submarines, the Los Angeles class, which is also shaped like a cigar. So while the Nautilus was very experimental with the nuclear power, the hull design is going to change later. So here I am with my friend Ed. We're down in Groton, Connecticut, visiting the Submarine Museum, which is really great. And we also got a chance to be on the Nautilus, our first nuclear-powered submarine.